Ms. Hargrove, we had the deadbolt replaced on Thursday. Tobias and I have decided this is our home now. And going forward, we need you to call before you come. Petra said, standing at half width in the doorway with one hand on the new brass plate. I had been awake since 4 a.m. The Delta flight from Denver had touched down at Hartsfield 47 minutes earlier, and I was still carrying the particular exhaustion of 5 days in conference rooms. The kind that settles behind your eyes and makes the ordinary world look slightly overexposed. My rolling suitcase was clicking its way up the front walkway behind me, the left rear wheel wobbling the way it has wobbled since August. A repair I have kept meaning to schedule. It was 9:22 a.m. on a Tuesday in November 2026, and I was standing on the front step of a house I have owned since George W. Bush was in his first term. I had put the key in the lock before I registered that the lock was different. The old deadbolt was a Schlag B60N I had installed in 2009. Brushed nickel, a small scratch near the keyhole from a night I came home with both hands full of groceries. This was brass. High polish, recently mounted, with a keypad on its face that someone had taped a handwritten code card to. The card tucked under the lip of the frame where it was visible only if you were standing at the right angle. I was standing at exactly the right angle. I stood there with the key in my hand for a moment. Then the door opened. Petra was wearing a cream bathrobe with her initials embroidered at the breast pocket in a thin sage thread. P.C.F. Petra Calloway Faulkner, which is a name she has held for 22 months. She was holding a mug of something. She looked rested. She looked, in fact, the way a person looks when they have been expecting this moment and have had several days to decide how they want their face to arrange itself for it. I am 57 years old. I have been a regional director of commercial leasing at Trellis Property Group for 11 years. I have closed transactions on properties worth more money than most people will ever see in one room, and I have done it across a table from men who believed my age and my patience were the same thing as inexperience. I know what a prepared face looks like. Petra's face was prepared. "I'm sorry," I said. She repeated herself, almost word for word, with the same measured cadence she had used the first time. The deadbolt had been replaced on Thursday. She and Tobias had decided this was their home now. Going forward, she would need me to call before I came. I want to be careful here about what I tell you I felt, because what I felt was not the simple thing the word shock would suggest. What I felt was a specific displacement, the way you feel when you reach for a light switch in a room you've known for 20 years and your hand lands on nothing but wall. Not because the switch is gone, but because someone moved it 2 inches to the left while you were sleeping. The facts were the same. The house was still the house. My name was still on the deed. But my hand was landing on nothing but wall. "Petra," I said, "where is Tobias?" "He's resting," she said. "He had a long week." I looked at her. She looked back at me with the particular expression of someone who has rehearsed patience for an occasion they were certain was coming. Her hand was still on the new brass plate. She had not opened the door wider. She had not invited me in. She was standing in my foyer, in my doorway, in a monogrammed bathrobe, telling me that my arrangement with my own house had changed. "You understand," I said, that my name is on the deed to this property. Tobias has explained the situation to an attorney, she said, and we've been advised that after 22 months of primary residence and significant property investment, there are legal protections available to us. I'm not trying to make this adversarial. Vivian, I'm just asking you to respect that this is our space. I noticed two things in that sentence. The first was that she had shifted from Ms. Hargrove to Vivian without being invited to. The second was the phrase significant property investment, which had the particular rounded smoothness of language someone else had written for her. I said nothing. She held the door for another 3 seconds. Not long, but long enough that we were both aware of the length. And then she said, I'll let Tobias know you stopped by. And she closed it. The latch clicked. I heard the keypad beep twice from the inside. A lock confirming itself. I stood on the front step for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 minutes because my phone was in my hand, and I looked at it when the door closed, and looked at it again when I finally moved. And the difference was 11 minutes. It was 41 degrees, and there was a thin November sun coming through the oak at the property line. The one I planted in 2007 as a sapling from a nursery in Decatur, which is now 40 feet tall and drops leaves onto the driveway from October through December. The leaves were on the driveway now. Nobody had raked them. I looked at the door. I looked at the oak. I looked at the doorbell camera I had installed in June of 2021, which is a Nest Hello model with a wide-angle lens and a 90-day cloud archive, and which is mounted directly above the new brass deadbolt at approximately eye level, and which Petra had been walking past for 22 months. I thought about Thursday, 8:14 a.m., which was a time I'd been sitting in a pre-conference briefing at the Marriott Denver Tech Center with my second cup of coffee and a site survey for a commercial property on Arapahoe Road. I thought about what a Thursday morning in my house looks like without me in it. And then I stopped thinking about Thursday because I was standing on the front step with my suitcase handle still in my hand, and there was no productive use of the next 11 minutes that involved standing still. I reached into the inside pocket of my laptop bag. The bag is a Toomey Messenger I have carried since 2014. Black ballistic nylon, a little scuffed at the corner from a cab door in Atlanta, which I've never bothered to have repaired. The inside pocket has a zipper that I once replaced when the original pull broke. Inside that pocket, in a manila envelope that is worn soft at the creases from 23 years of handling, is the original notarized deed to this property. The deed records a purchase completed on November 14th, 2003, in the amount of $312,000. The name on the deed is mine, Vivian Hargrove, and mine alone. I have carried that envelope every day since I signed the closing documents. It is an occupational reflex. I work in commercial property, and I learned early in this industry that the person who has the document in the room is the person who controls the room. The habit migrated from my briefcase to my laptop bag sometime around 2010, and I have not left a house or an office or a hotel room without it since. I took the envelope out and held it. I did not open it. I did not need to open it. I know what is inside. The deed, the title insurance policy, the survey plat from 2003, the notary seal still crisp, because I have always kept the envelope in a plastic sleeve inside the leather pocket. I know the legal description by memory, which is not a thing most people know about their own homes, but is a thing I know because I've read it so many times over 23 years that it has become structural. The way a phone number you have dialed since childhood stays in your fingers, even when your mind goes blank. I looked at the envelope. I looked at the door. I put the envelope back into the inside pocketing of my bag. I picked up my suitcase handle. I walked to my car, which was parked at the curb, and I put the suitcase in the trunk. I did not knock. It takes 11 minutes to drive from my house to the Hampton Inn on Forsyth Street, which I know because I've made the drive in the other direction approximately 8,000 times in 23 years, and the symmetry of that number was not lost on me as I sat at a red light at the intersection of Peachtree and Collier, with both hands on the wheel and the heat on low. I'm not going to tell you that I was calm. I was not calm. But I was also not the kind of not calm that announces itself. Not shaking, not crying, not gripping the wheel with white knuckles the way women in movies do when they receive bad news in a vehicle. What I was doing was the thing I always do when I am not calm, which is go very still and very precise. I was noting details. The Nest camera above the new brass deadbolt, the keypad code card tucked under the lip of the frame, the monogrammed bathrobe, the phrase significant property investment, and the particular way it came out of Petra's mouth. Rounded and ready, like something she had been coached to say. The light changed and I drove. At the Hampton Inn, I gave the front desk clerk my corporate card and asked for something on the 4th floor, away from the elevator. She gave me room 412. I thanked her. I pulled my suitcase to the elevator bank and stood there waiting for the doors to open. And it was only then, in that specific interval, in that specific fluorescent light, with no one watching and nothing required of me, that I let myself think about Tobias. He was in the house. He had been in the house when Petra opened the door. He was resting, she had said. He had had a long week. Tobias is my son. He is 34 years old and 6 feet tall, and he has his father's hands and my mother's stubbornness. And I have loved him since the morning he was born, with a vividness that has not diminished once in 34 years. I am not telling you this to soften what comes next. I am telling you this so that you understand the weight of the fact that when Petra opened that door and told me my arrangement had changed, Tobias was inside, and he did not come to the door. The elevator arrived. Room 412 was on the 4th floor corner, which meant 2 windows, one facing Forsyth, one facing the parking structure. The room smelled like fresh linens and the particular air-conditioned neutrality of a place that accommodates hundreds of people without knowing any of them. I set my suitcase in the corner without unpacking it. I set my laptop bag on the desk. I took off my coat. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and I put my hand on the outside of the laptop bag, where the inside pocket is, where the manila envelope is, where the deed to my house has been for 23 years. I did not take it out again. Not yet. What I did was pick up my phone and text my son. Call me when you can. And then I opened the Hampton Inn's room service menu because I had not eaten since the airport. And I chose the grilled chicken sandwich and the side salad. And I set the menu down on the nightstand. And I sat there in room 412 with my coat on the back of the desk chair and my suitcase in the corner and the deed in the inside pocket of my bag. And I thought about a Thursday morning in November at 8:14 a.m. and a camera above a brass deadbolt and a woman standing in my doorway in a monogrammed robe telling a locksmith she was the homeowner. Petra had had 5 days in that house without me. 5 days, and a locksmith's number, and an attorney, and apparently a plan. What she did not appear to have was any memory of the camera. That night, after the food arrived, and I did not eat it, and the room grew dark, and Tobias still had not called, I reached into the laptop bag and took out the manila envelope and set it flat on the comforter beside me. I did not open it. I put my hand on it the way you put your hand on something you are not ready to read yet, but need to know is still there. It was still there. At 11:14 p.m., my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Then I looked at the envelope. Then I picked up. What I did not say in that phone call was what I was going to do next. What I said instead was measured and careful and short. But by the time I hung up, I had already reached into my laptop bag a second time. Not for the envelope, but for the leather-bound work planner I used to document every property transaction I have ever touched. I opened it to a clean page. I wrote today's date at the top. And then I began to write a column of notes that I would not close until after midnight. In the particular silence of a hotel room where my suitcase sat packed in the corner and the doorbell camera on my own front step was still running its 90-day cloud archive without anyone home to check it. What was on that archive was something Petra had apparently decided she could afford not to think about. She was wrong. The front desk clerk at the Hampton Inn on Forsyth Street had the particular practice neutrality of someone who has checked in 1,000 people who did not want to explain why they needed a room at 10:45 on a Tuesday morning. She processed my corporate card, assigned me room 412, and slid a keycard across the counter without asking a single question. I thanked her and meant it. The room was on the 4th floor. Corner position. 2 windows. I had asked for something away from the elevator, and she had obliged. From the window facing east, if you stood at a particular angle, you could see the top 2 floors of a mixed-use development I had toured in 2019 on behalf of a client who ultimately passed. Too much deferred maintenance on the HVAC, which I had flagged in my site report, and which the seller had described, memorably, as a difference of professional opinion. I had been right. The building sold to a different buyer 8 months later at a price that reflected the compressor replacement. I set my suitcase in the corner of room 412 without unpacking it. The desk held a lamp, a pad of Hampton Inn stationery, and a pen with the hotel's phone number printed on the barrel. I set my laptop bag on the chair and put my laptop on the desk. Then I took the manila envelope from the inside pocket of the bag and set it on the comforter. Flat. Beside my phone. I sat in the desk chair and looked at both of them, the phone and the envelope, for a moment. Then I picked up the phone and sent Tobias a text. Call me when you can. I sent it at 10:58 a.m. I looked at the time when I sent it because I was already, by then, keeping track of time. The afternoon had a particular texture I know from work travel. The quality of light through hotel curtains, the sound of the HVAC cycling, the low-grade remove that comes from being in a space designed to hold anyone, and therefore holds no one. I have spent a significant portion of my adult life in rooms like this one, moving between cities for site visits and closings and client presentations, and I've learned to be productive in them. What is required is a surface and a window and enough silence to think. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the cloud storage account where my work files live. Not the one for Trellis. The personal one, where I store documents that predate my current position. The deed was in there, scanned, as it has been since 2008. I opened the file. I read the legal description, which I already knew by memory. And then I closed it and opened the Nest app on my phone. The Nest Hello camera at my front door has a 90-day cloud archive. I have checked it perhaps twice in 5 years. Once when a package was reported delivered, but didn't arrive. It had been left by the side gate, which the camera confirmed. And once when I wanted to verify that the tree service I had hired in 2023 had trimmed the oak on the property line rather than removing the branch I had specified. I was not in the habit of reviewing it. I had not reviewed it since I left for Denver 5 days ago. I closed the Nest app without looking at the archive. Not yet. What I knew, as of 10:58 a.m. on that Tuesday, was the following. I owned the house. My name was the only name on the deed. The deed was executed in November 2003, predating Petra's entry into the family by 11 years, and her marriage to Tobias by 22 months. No document transferring any interest in the property had ever been executed. Because I had never executed one, Tobias's occupancy was informal, invited, oral, and revocable. Petra's occupancy derived entirely from her relationship with Tobias. Neither of them held a key to anything that was actually theirs. What I did not yet know was how far this had gone. The phrase "we've been advised by an attorney" was the detail that kept returning to me. Not "we've been thinking about" or "we've decided." Advised. Someone had given them counsel before the locksmith arrived. The deadbolt was not an impulse. I opened a browser window and did not know exactly what I was looking for. I was not yet at the point of strategy. I was still at the point of inventory. At 2:30 p.m., I ordered coffee from room service and it arrived in 11 minutes, which is fast for a hotel. I drank it at the desk with my laptop open and a yellow legal pad beside me. Not the leather-bound planner, which I had not yet opened, but a pad from the messenger bag's outer pocket that I use for rough notes. The legal pad is where things go before they are ready to become columns. I wrote down what I knew. I wrote down what I did not know. I drew a line between the two lists and looked at the ratio. The column of what I did not know was longer, but the what I knew column was denser. There is a difference. In commercial property, the side with the cleaner title wins. Title is not a feeling. It does not depend on who painted the walls or who used the space longest, or who told the utility company which name to use on the bill. It is a document, recorded in a courthouse, with a date on it. My date was November 14th, 2003. I circled it. At 4:15 p.m., I texted Tobias again. Whenever you're ready. He did not reply. Dinner arrived at 7:40. The grilled chicken sandwich and a side salad, which I had ordered more out of obligation to myself than appetite. I moved it from the tray to the desk, took 3 bites of the sandwich, and covered the rest with the napkin. The salad I did not touch. I poured a glass of water from the bathroom tap and sat on the edge of the bed with my phone. The phone screen showed 8:02 p.m. Tobias had been in the house, my house, since at least 9:22 that morning. He had been resting, Petra had said. He had had a long week. I set the phone on the comforter beside the manila envelope. I want to tell you, I was angry. It would be a cleaner accounting. But what I was sitting with was something less clean. Something closer to the feeling of reviewing a commercial lease and finding, buried in paragraph 14, a clause that rewrites the entire agreement, and understanding that someone knew the clause was there when they handed you the pen. The anger is real, but it is not the first thing. The first thing is precision. Where is the clause? What does it say? Whose signature is on it? The clause, in this case, was a deadbolt, high-polished brass, with a keypad. At 11:02 p.m., my phone rang. "Mom," Tobias said, "I'm so sorry I didn't call earlier. It's been a hard day." "I'm sure it has," I said. There was a pause. In the pause, I could hear him deciding what to say next, and I let him decide. "I need you to know that I didn't. I wasn't part of the decision about the lock. That was Petra. I would have told you first." "Okay," I said. "I want to fix this. I need you to understand that Petra feels like this is her home too. She's been here for almost 2 years. She's put a lot of herself into this house." I said nothing. "I know that doesn't make what she did okay," he said. "I know that. I'm asking you to talk to her before anything else, before you do anything legal." "Tobias," I said, "where are you right now?" He paused. "I'm in the kitchen." "Are you staying tonight?" Another pause. "Yes." "In my house." "Mom." "I'm not asking you not to," I said. "I'm just asking you to know what you're doing." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I know what I'm doing. I'm trying to hold this together." "I know," I said. We talked for 6 more minutes. I kept my voice even throughout all of them. I asked him how work was going. He is a software engineer at Vertex Systems, a company I know nothing about. And I listened while he gave me a 2-minute answer about a deployment that had gone sideways last Thursday, which is the same Thursday that Petra was on my front step with a locksmith at 8:14 in the morning. I noted the timing. I said nothing about the timing. I did not mention the camera. I did not mention the envelope on the comforter. When we hung up, it was 11:14 p.m. I know because I looked at my phone when the call ended and wrote the time on the legal pad. I moved the food tray to the dresser. I took the manila envelope and put it back in the inside pocket of my laptop bag. I went to the bathroom and washed my face and brushed my teeth. I put on the clothes I sleep in when I travel. A Trellis Property Group t-shirt from a 2022 conference and a pair of athletic shorts I have had since before Tobias was born, which is a fact I am sharing not for sentiment, but for accuracy. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and reached into my bag for the leather-bound planner. The planners are dark burgundy moleskins I have used since 2019, 2 volumes now, each one filled in the same hand and the same columns. Every commercial transaction I have touched for the past 7 years is in those pages in some form, not the legal documents, which live elsewhere, but the sequence. Who knew what? When? What was said? What was produced? What was not produced, and why? I opened the planner to the next clean page. I wrote today's date at the top. I drew a vertical line down the center of the page. On the left side, I wrote, what I have. On the right side, I wrote, what I need. I worked for 40 minutes. I did not stop to second guess or reassess. This is the discipline of the work. You inventory first and evaluate later. You do not go into a site review deciding what you will find. You look at what is there. You document what you see. And you let the documentation tell you what to do next. When I finally put the planner down, the left column was 4 items. The right column was 3. I turned off the lamp. I lay in the dark of room 412 with the HVAC cycling and the faint orange light from the parking structure coming through the gap in the curtains. And I thought about February 2025, which is when Tobias called me to say the lease on his and Petra's apartment in Midtown had not been renewed. And I had said, without pausing to think about it, come stay at the house while you figure things out. The first line in the left column of my notes said, November 14th, 2003. Deed. My name. Alone. The first line in the right column read, what has she filed and where? By morning, I would need an attorney. The phone call from Tobias in February 2025 lasted 4 minutes. He told me the landlord on their Midtown apartment had decided not to renew. New management company, different plans for the building, nothing personal. He and Petra had 30 days. He was not asking me for anything. He said, which was the sentence that told me he was. I said, come stay at the house while you find your footing. He said, Mom, are you sure? I said, I'm sure. I want to be precise about what I meant when I said that. I meant, come stay for a few months. I meant, use the guest room, pay no rent while you stabilize, find an apartment by summer. I meant, this is what family does. I did not mean move in. I did not mean bring everything you own and your wife's entire decorating sample library. I did not mean a few months. None of that was in the 4-minute phone call because none of it seemed necessary to say. That, sitting in room 412 on a Wednesday morning with my planner open and the legal pad beside it, was the specific error I was now examining. Not that I had offered. The offer was reasonable. The error was the absence of a term sheet. I have worked in commercial property for 26 years. I have never handed over access to a space without a document. Not once. Not to anyone. And then I handed over access to my own house, to my own son, over a 4-minute phone call on the assumption that the word footing meant the same thing to all 3 of us. It did not. They moved in on a Saturday in March 2025, which was 2 weeks after the wedding. The wedding had been in January, a small ceremony at a venue in Buckhead. I am 30 guests. White flowers Petra had arranged herself, which I will say was genuinely beautiful work. She has a real eye for that, and I have never disputed it. I sat in the second row and watched my son marry her, and I was glad for him. He was glad too. I could see it in the way he kept looking at her during the vows. Not performing happiness for the room, actually having it. I tell you this because I want to be accurate. Petra in January 2025, at that wedding, was not the person I am describing the rest of. People are not one thing across time. What I am describing is what happened over 22 months. One accommodation at a time, and the first accommodation was mine. I said yes, before I had thought through what yes meant. The moving truck arrived on a Saturday. There was more furniture than I had anticipated. A sectional sofa that replaced mine. Mine went to the storage unit Tobias rented on Bolton Road. A dining table Petra described as more functional than the one I had. A set of pendant lights she had ordered for the kitchen without mentioning it. The pendant lights arrived on a Tuesday, 2 weeks after they moved in. The electrician came on a Thursday. I received no call about either. I noticed. I said nothing. I told myself, she's nesting. It's what people do when they move somewhere new. It will settle. It did not settle. It accumulated. By May, 2 of the 3 guest bedrooms had been repainted. A warm linen colour in one, a deep slate in the other. Petra did it over a long weekend while I was in Charlotte for a closing. She sent me a photograph on Sunday afternoon with the caption, "So much better in here." Right? The photograph showed the room I had painted sage green in 2018, which I had chosen because the morning light in that room is a particular shade that sage green complements, and which I had spent 3 weekends getting exactly right. The new colour was fine. The new colour looked like the interior of a rental property. I sent back a thumbs up emoji, which is the most truthful thing I have ever done with a single character. By July, the back room, which I had used since 2019 as a home office, where I kept my filing cabinet and my reference library of zoning codes and property surveys, had been cleared of my materials and converted into what Petra called her studio. My filing cabinet was in the garage. My reference library was in 4 boxes in the storage unit on Bolton Road, next to my sectional sofa. She had asked, technically, she had texted, would it be okay if I used the back room for work samples? I'm trying to get more clients and I need somewhere to spread out. I had said yes. I had not said yes to moving my filing cabinet to the garage. That part simply happened. I noticed. I said nothing. I told myself, they're building a life. You offered them a place to do that. This is what you offered. In August, I got a new customer number from Atlanta Gaslight. The email was automated. A confirmation of account transfer, addressed to me as the account holder of record, informing me that the service address had been updated and the account was now in the name of the new primary resident. The name listed was Petra Calloway Faulkner. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to a folder I had labelled House, Misc, and told myself it was a billing convenience. Tobias and Petra were paying the utilities. This had been the arrangement since April, in lieu of rent, an arrangement I had also accepted over text. And I told myself that Petra had simply switched the billing name to her own to make the payments easier to track. I believed this because I needed to believe it. I am going to be honest with you about that. It would have required me to do something I was not ready to do, to call Petra and say, "You do not have the authority to name yourself the primary resident of my house. And I need you to correct this." It would have required me to acknowledge that the arrangement had moved past the place where politeness was an adequate response to it. If you have watched someone quietly take more space than they were given, one small thing at a time, and said nothing, because each individual thing seemed too small to make a case out of, then you understand what I am telling you. The individual things are never the point. The accumulation is the point, and by the time the accumulation is undeniable, you have already spent months building the silence that made it possible. Vivian Hargrove, the woman who carries a deed in her laptop bags everywhere she goes, looked at an email that used the phrase primary resident next to someone else's name, filed it in a folder called MISC, and closed her laptop. If that pattern of quiet absorption, and what it cost, is why this channel tells the stories it does. A like and a subscribe is how the next one gets found. The gas account was not the only one. When Renata Guillen told me, 2 days after the lockout, that 3 utility accounts had been transferred during the week I was in Denver, I had to sit with the specific weight of that number for a moment. 3, electric, gas, water, each one filed with the utility company under Petra's name, each one listing her as co-occupant with equitable interest. The phrase equitable interest is a legal designation. It does not mean a person feels at home somewhere. It means a person is asserting a legal claim to the property. Petra had typed that phrase into 3 separate utility transfer forms during the 5 days I was presenting site surveys in Denver. She had not typed it by accident. But in August, when the first transfer landed in my inbox, I had not yet heard the phrase equitable interest. I had not yet called Renata. I had not yet stood in front of a new deadbolt at 9:22 in the morning with my key in my hand. I was a woman who had said yes too quickly, and who was now maintaining a silence she had originally called flexibility, then called kindness, and had most recently, somewhere around July, quietly reclassified as normalcy. The distinction between those 3 things is not semantic. Flexibility is a choice you make with full information. Kindness is a choice you make towards someone else's benefit. Normalcy is what happens when you stop making a choice and let the inertia carry you. And the difference is that normalcy can be rewritten. Given enough time and a willing attorney, someone else can look at your normalcy and call it permission. I wrote the word normalcy in my planner that Wednesday morning and drew a line through it. Then I drew a second column beside the first one and started writing the specific dates of every change I could remember. In order, from March through October, the furniture, the paint, the studio, the gas account, the electric account. I did not yet know about the water account. I did not yet know about the Zillow listing. I was still operating on the information I had, which was enough to build the left side of a case, but not yet enough to understand how far the plan had gone. The Nest app was still open on my phone, minimized, waiting. I had not yet opened the camera archive. That was the next thing, and what it showed me on that Wednesday morning was not just a locksmith. It was a timeline that started 4 days before I ever left for Denver, and it changed the shape of everything I thought I was looking at. Wednesday morning in room 412, 7:03 a.m. The Hampton Inn's complimentary coffee was in a paper cup on the desk, and I had not touched it. My laptop was open. The Nest app was open inside it. I want to tell you that I had a plan when I opened the archive. I did not. What I had was a column of notes in my planner and a right side column of questions. And the first question on the right side was, what is on the camera? The answer was something I did not fully anticipate, which is an unusual experience for me in property work. And it is the reason I am starting this section on a Wednesday morning in a hotel room rather than on the Tuesday afternoon I got home, which is when I should have looked. I opened the archive and scrolled to Thursday. The timestamp read 8:14 a.m. The footage was clear. The Nest Hello has a wide-angle lens, and the November morning light on the front step was flat and sufficient. Petra was standing at the door with a man in a grey work shirt who was carrying a canvas tool bag. She had the new deadbolt in a box, still in its packaging, and she was handing it to him. He looked at the existing lock. He said something I could not hear. The camera records video with audio, but she was facing away from the lens, and his voice was low. She nodded. Then she said, "The old one just stopped working. We need something more reliable." He installed the new deadbolt in 41 minutes. When he finished, he handed her 2 keys. She tried one in the lock. She tried the other. Both worked. She thanked him, and he left. I wrote the timestamp and the word locksmith in my planner. Then I scrolled back further. Wednesday. Not last Wednesday. The Wednesday before I left for Denver. 6 days before the deadbolt. There was no one on the front step. The camera's motion sensor had activated at 9:47 a.m. and logged 11 seconds of footage. A car passing on the street, close enough to the property line to trigger the sensor. I kept scrolling. Tuesday, nothing. Monday, 7:22 a.m. A truck was parked at the curb. Not a large moving truck, a medium cargo van, white, with a rental company logo on the panel. The rear doors were open. Tobias was on the front walkway carrying a box. He made 4 trips over the course of what the camera logged as 19 minutes. The boxes were taped shut and unlabeled. On the 3rd trip, he looked up at the camera. Not a long look, a glance, and then his eyes went back down to the box in his arms, and he kept walking. I played that clip 3 times. He knew the camera was there. He has known it was there since 2021. I had told him when I installed it, explained the cloud archive, shown him how to check the footage on his phone in case anything happened while he was at the house. He knew. And on a Monday morning, carrying boxes into my house from a rented cargo van, he glanced at the lens and looked away. I wrote, Monday, 7:22 a.m., van, boxes, Tobias. I drew a line under it. Sunday, 2:31 p.m. The motion sensor had picked up Petra on the front step. But she was not at the door. She was facing the house, standing back far enough to get the full facade in frame. She had a camera in her hands, not her phone. A mirrorless camera with a short lens, the kind a working decorator would use for portfolio shots. She took 4 photographs of the exterior, pausing between each one to check the screen. Then she went inside. The camera logged her re-entering at 2:36 p.m. and did not log her again until 6:14 p.m., when she left briefly and returned 11 minutes later. She had been inside photographing the rooms for nearly 4 hours. I set my coffee down. I had not realized I had picked it up. I keep the before-trip photographs on my phone in a folder I created in 2019 and have added to every time I've left the house for more than 2 nights. This is the same habit I apply to every commercial property I manage access to. Photograph the space before the key changes hands. When I left for Denver the previous Thursday morning, I had walked through every room at 5:45 a.m. while Tobias and Petra were still asleep and taken 37 photographs. Living room, kitchen, both bathrooms, the hallway, all 3 guest bedrooms, the back room that is now Petra's studio. Every surface, every wall, every fixture. I opened the photographs now and set them beside the laptop on the hotel bed. Then I opened the shared browser account. The account is a household Gmail I created in 2020 to manage service subscriptions. Streaming, the alarm company, the pest control renewal, things I wanted accessible from multiple devices. I shared it with Tobias when he moved in case he needed to access the alarm panel remotely. I had not changed the password. I had not thought about the password. I typed it from memory and the inbox opened. I was not looking for anything specific. I was looking for what was there. What was there in a folder Petra had created and labelled Listing Prep was a series of emails between a Zillow account and an address I did not recognise, along with 3 draft documents she had not yet submitted. The first draft was a property description. It was written in the first person. The opening sentence read, "I have spent the past 2 years transforming this 4-bedroom, 2-bath home into a carefully designed residence that reflects both modern aesthetics and livable comfort." I read that sentence twice. She had used the word transforming. She had used the phrase 2 years. She had not used the word permission. The second document was a photo set. 31 images of the interior, taken on a mirrorless camera, edited with consistent white balance. The living room with the furniture she had ordered, the repainted bedrooms, the slate one and the linen one, the kitchen with the pendant lights her electrician had installed, the back room, now her studio, arranged and lit for a listing photograph. Every room she had altered. No room she had not. I pulled up my before-trip photographs beside the Zillow images on the screen. The pendant lights were in both. Mine from November 2026. Hers from whatever Sunday afternoon she had spent in the house with her mirrorless camera. The bathroom vanity was in both. The vanity Petra's attorney would later claim as a $47,200 improvement, which I had purchased and installed in 2019, 3 years before Petra set foot in this house. I noted this on the legal pad. I noted all of it. The third document was the draft listing itself. The asking price was $589,000. I want to be precise about what I did next, because I want you to understand the sequence. I did not close the laptop immediately. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and I read the listing description in full. It was 2 paragraphs. It described the property's location, its square footage, which Petra had listed correctly, which meant she had looked it up, and its recent updates. The updates were described as having been lovingly made by the current owner. The property was described as move-in ready. There was a note at the bottom. Sellers motivated. Price to close. Sellers, plural. I read that word. I set the laptop on the desk. I looked at the legal pad, which now had 3 columns on it, not 2. The third column I had added sometime in the last 20 minutes, and what was in it was a row of specific items with specific timestamps, and beneath that, 2 numbers side by side, $312,000 and $589,000. The difference between them is $277,000. That is the amount Petra had decided, without any document and without any authority and without telling me that my house was worth above what I paid for it, and which she had intended to collect. I did not have words for what I was looking at that felt proportionate to what it was. The Zillow listing was a draft. It had not been submitted. But it was not a fantasy either. It was a document with photographs, with a price, with a description, and with a plan. The moving truck on Monday, the new furniture already in place, the deadbolt on Thursday, the listing on standby. What Petra had built over the week I was in Denver was a sequence designed to present a specific fact to a potential buyer before I could dispute it, that the person living in and listing this house was its rightful owner. I closed the laptop. The asking price was $589,000, and Renata Guillen's number was in my phone. And I was going to call it at 7:48 in the morning. Renata Guillen picked up on the third ring, which is what she has always done in the 12 years I have known her. Not the first ring, which would suggest she was waiting. Not the fourth or fifth, which would suggest she was busy. The third ring is a deliberate answer. I heard you, and I'm ready.
Vivienne, she said, it's early. Talk to me.
It was 7:48 a.m. Thursday. I was at the desk in room 412 with the planner open, the legal pad beside it, and my laptop on the bed, showing the Nest archive paused on the locksmith footage. I had been awake since 5. I told Renata everything in the order it had happened, which is the only order that matters in property disputes. The Tuesday lockout, the Wednesday camera review, the Zillow draft, with the $589,000 asking price. The utility transfers I had found in Renata's own right column the night before. I spoke for 9 minutes without interruption. Renata asked 2 questions during those 9 minutes. The first was, is your name the only name on the deed? The second was, when were the utility transfers filed? I told her, yes, and last week, during the Denver trip. There was a pause of approximately 4 seconds. Read me the exact language from the utility transfer forms, she said. The description she used when she filed. I had the Gmail account open in a browser tab. I had found copies of the forms. Atlanta Gas Light, Georgia Power, and the Water Authority. Forwarded to the household account from what appeared to be an automated confirmation system. Petra had filed all 3 from the same email address and had apparently forwarded the confirmations to the shared inbox, either by habit or by mistake. I read Renata the language from the gas account confirmation, which was the one I had in front of me. Account holder of record, Petra Calloway Faulkner. Occupant status as reported, co-occupant with equitable interest. Another pause.
She wrote her own evidence for us, Renata said. I wrote that sentence down in the planner. I underlined it.
Renata's legal assessment took 22 minutes and required her to say only the necessary things, which is the quality that made me call her in the first place. She does not editorialize. She does not comfort. She identifies the load-bearing elements of a situation and tells you which ones will hold and which ones will not. And she does it with the same register she uses, whether she is describing a routine title search or a fraud claim
I have referred 3 clients to her over the years, and all 3 have described the first conversation the same way. She was almost too calm. I have always taken that as a recommendation.
The house, she told me, is not marital property under Georgia law. Marital property is what is acquired during the marriage. My house was acquired in November 2003. Tobias and Petra married in January 2025. No Georgia court will classify a property purchased 22 years before a marriage as a marital asset.
Even if Tobias had been on the deed, she said, which he is not, the premarital acquisition date would insulate most of the equity from a marital property claim. He is not on the deed. This is not a complicated title question. The complication is the occupancy argument.
The occupancy argument, she explained, is what Petra was positioning for with the equitable interest language. It is the claim that long-term residence, combined with financial contribution to a property, even informal contribution, can, in some circumstances, create an interest that a court will recognise. It is a real legal theory. It has a narrow application, and it requires, at minimum, some documentation of the claimed contribution.
Does she have any document? Renata asked. That Vivian signed, authorising her to manage the property or accrue an interest in it?
No, I said.
Does she have a lease?
No.
Does she have a written agreement of any kind? Email, text, anything in writing, in which Vivian describes the arrangement as anything other than informal hospitality. I thought about the text exchanges over 22 months. The thumbs-up emoji I had sent when Petra described repainting the bedroom. The yes I had sent when asked if the back room could become a studio. I told Renata about those. Those are permissions for specific actions, Renata said. Not grants of interest, not authorizations to manage. She cannot turn a thumbs up on a paint color into a property claim. She has no document. That is her central problem, and there is no way around it, because the document that matters, the deed, predates her entirely. I drew a line in the right column of the planner and wrote, no document. Deed predates marriage by 22 years. The Zillow draft, Renata said, was not yet an actionable fraud because it had not been submitted. It was, however, evidence of intent, and it was evidence I had found in a shared account to which I had legitimate access. She asked me to take screenshots of the full listing draft, the photo set, and the pricing document, and to log the time and method of access before I closed the browser tab. I did this while we were still on the phone. Renata waited while I captured 11 screenshots and saved them to a folder I labelled with the date and timestamp. The utility transfers are the more immediate problem, she said, because they're already filed. Each one lists her as co-occupant with equitable interest, and she filed 3 of them in the same week, which establishes a pattern of intent, not a single clerical decision. Her own paperwork describes a legal status she had no authority to claim. That's going to be difficult for her attorney to explain. I noted this in a new column, a third column to the right of the second. The third column was Renata's. What went into it was different from what went into mine. Mine were facts and questions. Hers were assessments of which facts would hold weight in which forum and in what sequence. She was already thinking about sequence. I had not reached sequence yet. How quickly can you file? I asked. I can file the formal notice to vacate under Georgia residential tenancy law within 48 hours of our engagement. A 30-day notice, certified mail, return receipt. Once it's served, the clock starts. She paused. Vivian, I want to flag something. The 30-day notice treats them as tenants, which is accurate. They have no other legal status, but it will read to Tobias as escalation. I know, I said. You're prepared for that. It was not a question. I answered it anyway. I'm prepared for that. She moved on without comment. That is another thing I have always valued about Renata. She does not linger on the emotional register of a decision once you have made it. She noted that she would also need to file for a clarification of title, a formal document establishing that no interest in the property had been transferred to either Tobias or Petra, to preempt any future claim that my silence over 22 months constituted an informal conveyance. She would need a copy of the original deed, the 2003 closing documents, and the title insurance policy. I have all of those, I said. The originals are in a manila envelope in my laptop bag. I have scans in cloud storage going back to 2008. There was the briefest of pauses. Not surprise. Renata does not express surprise about professional habits, but something close to recognition. Of course you do, she said. The call ended at 8:34 a.m. 46 minutes, which is the longest I've spoken to Renata in a single phone call in 12 years. I set the phone on the desk and looked at the planner. The page I had started on Tuesday night now had 3 full columns and 2 sub-columns within the third. Why? The right margin had a series of circled items and arrows connecting them in a sequence Renata had outlined verbally and which I had transcribed in real time. I photographed the page with my phone and sent it to my work cloud storage. Then I opened a new email to Renata and attached the deed scan, the 2003 closing statement, and the 11 screenshots of the Zillow draft. I wrote, attached per hour call, available to sign engagement letter at your earliest convenience. I sent it at 8:41 a.m. Then I ordered breakfast from room service. Eggs, toast, coffee, and this time I ate it. I was not calm, exactly, but I was in a mode I recognize from the work, the one where the facts are arrayed in front of you and you know which ones are load-bearing and which ones will not survive contact with a judge's questions. And the only remaining variable is process. Process. I know how to manage. Process is what the second and third columns in the planner are for. Renata called back at 9:17 to confirm receipt of the documents and to tell me the engagement letter was in my inbox. I signed it electronically at 9:22. The same minute, I noted without comment that Petra had opened my front door to me on Tuesday morning. The 30-day notice to vacate was going to arrive at my house by certified mail, and Renata had told me to watch the camera archive for the moment it did. Renata filed the notice on a Friday morning. I was at the Hampton Inn desk with my laptop open and a fresh page in the planner when she texted to confirm. Notice to vacate filed under OCGA section 44-7-50. Certified mail, return receipt. Should arrive Monday at latest. I wrote the confirmation in the planner with the time, 9:47 a.m., and the statute number, which I looked up and read in full before I closed the tab. The notice gave Tobias and Petra 30 days. It identified them by name as unauthorized occupants of a residential property held solely in the name of Vivian Hargrove. It cited the absence of any lease or written tenancy agreement. It named a vacate date. It was 1 page, single-spaced, with Renata's firm letterhead at the top and a notary stamp at the bottom. I had not been present for any property action this significant in 26 years of work without being in the room for it. I was in room 412 on the 4th floor of a Hampton Inn, and my house was 10 minutes away, and I had not been inside it in 9 days. The certified envelope arrived on a Monday. I know the specific time because I checked the camera archive that afternoon. The postal carrier appeared on the front walkway at 10:28 a.m. The camera logged the motion sensor, then the doorbell, then the door opening. Petra answered it. She signed for the envelope. The carrier had a small electronic pad, and she signed with her finger. And then she stood in the foyer with the envelope in her hand. I watched the footage. The timestamp ran at the bottom of the frame. She stood still for 43 seconds. I counted them in real time, watching her on the screen from room 412. Her back was partially to the camera. She had opened the door wide, and the camera angle caught her in 3/4 profile. She did not open the envelope during those 43 seconds. She held it at her side with both hands. The way you hold something you already know the shape of. And she looked at nothing in particular. The foyer. The floor. At 10:32 a.m., she dialed. I could not hear the call. I could see that she walked to the kitchen and sat at the table. My kitchen table, the one I brought from my previous house in 2003, and have eaten it every morning since, and she talked for 11 minutes. Then she sat for another 2 minutes without the phone to her ear. Then she got up and went to the back of the house, out of camera range. I closed the archive and wrote in the planner, 10:31 a.m., signed for certified mail, 43 seconds before dialing. Called unknown party, 11 minutes. I wrote beneath it, she knows now. Tobias called me at 7:14 that evening. It was a Monday in late November, and the light through the hotel window had been gone for 2 hours. I had ordered soup from room service and eaten most of it. The planner was on the desk, and the pen was in my hand when the phone rang. "Mom," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond." "All right," I said. "I'm asking you, as your son, and as someone who is trying to hold this family together, to reach out to Petra. Before this goes any further, she's scared. And I think if the two of you could just talk directly, without attorneys involved, you might find that there's a way through this that doesn't have to end in a courtroom." I said nothing. I let him continue. "I know you're angry," he said. "I know what she did with the lock was wrong. And I told her that. I've told her that. But she loves this house. And she's put real effort into it. And she feels like the family doesn't see her. Like she's always going to be on the outside of something. And I think that if you could just tell her that you value her, that you want her in this family, I think that would mean a lot. That's what this is really about. Family. That's what I'm asking you to protect here." He paused. "She's my wife, Mom. She's family. I need you to remember that." I counted. He had said the word 4 times in approximately 6 minutes, which I know because I had been watching the clock on my phone since the call began. as a matter of habit. I said, I understand what you're asking me to do. I said, my name is on the deed to that house. Tobias, not as a preference or an opinion, but as a recorded legal fact that predates your marriage by 22 years. I said, I won't be calling Petra, and I won't be withdrawing the notice. I said, I love you. I'll talk to you soon. He was quiet for a moment. Then, Mom, I think you're making a mistake. Maybe, I said. Can I come and talk to you in person? Not about the legal stuff, just us. Yes, I said. Come whenever you want. He said he would call in a few days to figure out a time. I said that was fine. We hung up. I sat at the Hampton Inn desk for a while after the call. The soup bowl was at the edge of the desk, and the lamp was on and the planner was open to the page with Monday's date at the top. I had filled most of the page by then. The column on the left, the column on the right, Renata's third column with the statute number and the notice date. There was still a small section at the bottom of the page that was blank, and I picked up the pen. I thought about the word family 4 times in 6 minutes. I thought about what Tobias believed it meant when he used it, that the word could function as both argument and answer, that saying family enough times in a row would eventually dissolve the boundary between what was mine and what was not. I thought about 22 months of pendant lights and paint colours and utility transfers, all of it done under the implicit authority of that word. I thought about the 43 seconds Petra had stood in my foyer, holding a certified envelope. I picked up the pen! At the bottom of the Monday page, I wrote the date. Then I capped the pen and set it down, parallel to the page edge, which is a habit I have had since the first planner I bought for work in 1998. There was a sentence in my head that I did not write and did not say, because it was not the kind of sentence that advances anything to say aloud. It was the kind of sentence you let sit in the back of your mind so that you remember when someone calls and uses the word family 4 times, exactly what kind of problem you are dealing with. The sentence was, that's not a family problem. That's a property law problem. Tobias was coming in person. He had not yet said when, but I knew it would be soon. And I knew that when he sat down across from me, there would be something he had not yet told me, something he had done or signed or agreed to, that Petra had not mentioned on the front step, and that he had not mentioned on either of his phone calls. There is a particular quality to the things people omit. You can feel the shape of them before the person tells you. I had been feeling that shape since Tuesday morning, when Tobias did not come to the door. Tobias arrived at room 412 at 9:04 a.m. on a Saturday, which meant he had driven from my house in the dark. Before the November sun had fully cleared the tree line on Forsyth. He was wearing a fleece I recognised from years ago. Charcoal grey. A small pull at the left sleeve. And he had the look of someone who had not slept well and had decided to make an effort to conceal it, which made it more visible, not less. I was on the edge of the bed with the planner open across my knees. I had been awake since 6, which is normal for me. I gestured to the desk chair, and he sat in it, and he looked at the desk for a moment. The Hampton Inn stationery, the pen with the hotel number printed on the barrel, my empty coffee cup from 7 a.m. before he looked at me. Petra hired an attorney, he said. I know, I said. Renata told me. He nodded. He had known I would know. He had come anyway. He talked for 9 minutes before I asked him anything. I have learned, over 34 years of knowing my son, that Tobias needs a full runway before he can land on the thing he actually came to say. He works around the edges of a difficult subject, the way you circle a parking garage looking for a spot. Patient, methodical, not quite ready to commit. I let him circle. The counterclaim, he said, was for $47,200. Petra's attorney had entered it as the total value of property improvements she had made during the occupancy. There was also an adverse possession argument, which her attorney believed was viable based on what he described as 6 months of exclusive occupancy, during which Vivian had been primarily absent from the property. I did not point out that I had been primarily absent from the property because I had been locked out of it with a new deadbolt. I wrote $47,200 in the planner's margin and set the pen down. The adverse possession argument is thin, I said. Renata flagged it already. I know, he said, but there's something else. He stopped. He looked at the desk again. He had his hands in the front pocket of the fleece, the way he used to stand as a teenager when he had something to tell me that he expected me not to be glad to hear. 3 months ago, he said, Petra asked me to sign something. She called it a household management agreement. It was supposed to be, she said it was, to formalize the arrangement, make it cleaner, so that if there were ever any questions about who was managing the bills and the upkeep, there would be something in writing. I did not move. I signed it, he said. I read the title. I didn't read the rest. It was 4 pages, and I was tired, and she said it was just housekeeping, and I trusted her that it was what she said it was. Where is your copy? I asked. I can't find it, he said. She gave me a copy, and I put it somewhere, and I've looked in my files, and I can't find it. She said she had the original. The room was very quiet. The HVAC cycled on and then settled into its low background register. Did you read it? I asked. He looked at the carpet. No, he said. I want to be honest about what that moment was. Tobias is 34 years old, and he has his father's hands and my mother's stubbornness, and I have loved him since the morning he was born. And this is the same person who signed a 4-page document his wife handed him without reading it, and now cannot locate his copy. Both of those things were true simultaneously, and I was holding both of them in the same moment, sitting on the edge of a hotel bed in room 412 with a planner on my knees and a pen in my hand. I did not tell him what Renata had said when I called her the previous week about the general category of documents drafted without legal counsel and presented to a spouse to sign. I did not tell him what she had specifically noted about the likelihood that such a document, if it lacked proper attorney review and a legitimate notary seal, would hold no legal weight, regardless of what it claimed. That information was not mine to give him in that moment. It was Renata's to deploy in the appropriate venue at the appropriate time. I said, I love you. He looked up from the carpet. I know this is hard. I said, I know you are in the middle of something, and you didn't choose to be there. None of that changes what I have to do. She's my wife, Mom. I know, I said. "She's also trying to sell my house."
He didn't say anything to that. There was not much to say. I closed the planner. I stood up from the edge of the bed. I walked to the door of room 412, and opened it. And he stood too. And for a moment, we were just the two of us in a hotel doorway. My son, 6 feet tall, in a charcoal fleece, and me, the woman who taught him to tie his shoes on the front step of the house he currently could not enter. And I put my hand on his arm for a moment. "Call me," I said. He nodded. He stepped into the hallway, and the door closed. The 4-page document Tobias signed without reading, the one with the fake notary stamp and the wrong legal designations, was the single piece of evidence Petra had that predated her attorney's involvement. And it was also going to be the piece that collapsed fastest under scrutiny. If stories about the documents people sign in haste, and the ones they carry for 23 years without being asked, are why this channel keeps telling these stories, a like and a subscribe is how the next one finds its way here. Vivian's phone was already out. Renata picked up on the second ring, which was faster than usual. "I know," she said, before I had finished explaining. "Her attorney filed the counterclaim this morning. I have the 3 pages. Give me 20 minutes and call me back." I said I would. I looked at the time, 9:41 a.m., and wrote it in the planner. Then I looked at what was in my right side column, the one I'd built with Renata's assessments on the Thursday morning phone call, and I added a new line at the bottom. Document, 4 pages, no copy, signed without reading. Beside it, I wrote, in Renata's shorthand, from our first conversation, "She has no document that holds." 20 minutes later, I called back, and Renata told me what 47 line items of claimed improvements looked like when you held them against 37 before-trip photographs, and the number $47,200 began its rapid, unannounced reduction towards something considerably smaller. Petra's attorney filed 3 pages on a Tuesday. Renata sent me the filing as a PDF that afternoon with a single line of text beneath it. "Response will be 1 paragraph. Call me tomorrow morning." I read all 3 pages twice. The filing was organized into 2 arguments: the equitable interest claim based on property improvement, and the adverse possession argument based on primary occupancy. The first argument had an itemized exhibit attached, 47 line items across 2 columns, each with a claimed dollar value. The second argument cited 6 months of what the filing described as exclusive residential occupancy during a period when the property owner was voluntarily and regularly absent. I noted the phrase voluntarily and regularly absent. I had been in Denver for 5 days on a commercial leasing assignment. I set the filing on the desk beside my laptop and opened my before-trip photographs. The claim totaled $47,200. Renata had already told me the number would not survive contact with the photographs. She was correct. What I did not fully anticipate was how quickly the number would begin to come apart when examined item by item with a specific date-stamped image on one side of the screen and a receipt on the other. I worked through the 47 line items in the order they were listed. I had printed the exhibit on the hotel printer, 6 pages, double-sided, and I laid them flat on the desk beside the keyboard and went through each one with a pen. Line item 1, exterior paint, full house, premium grade. Claimed value,
$3,800. I pulled up photograph 14 from my before trip set, which shows the front elevation of the house at 5:48 a.m. on the Thursday I left for Denver. The house in that photograph is painted the same color it has been since 2018. A warm white I chose specifically because it reads as cream in direct light and grey in shadow. A detail I have always liked. Brie, the paint in Petra's claim was the same color. The house had not been repainted. I drew a line through line item 1. Line item 7. Master bathroom vanity with integrated sink. Custom. Claimed value $2,400. I stopped at this one. The vanity in my master bathroom is a piece I sourced from a specialty supplier in Decatur in November 2019. It has a white quartz countertop and an undermount basin, and the cabinet face is a dark walnut veneer I selected specifically because it complements the hexagonal floor tile I had installed in 2017. I pulled up photograph 31 from the before trip set, which shows the master bathroom at 5:52 a.m. on the Thursday I left. The vanity is in the photograph. The quartz countertop is in the photograph. The dark walnut cabinet face is in the photograph. I had owned that vanity for 7 years. Petra had been in the house for 22 months. I drew a line through line item 7. The methodology took approximately 3 hours, which I mention only so you understand the scope of the work, and not because the duration is the point. The point is what the before-trip photographs made possible, a specific, time-stamped visual record of exactly what the house contained at 5:45 a.m. on the morning of November 13th, 2026. Compared against 47 line items, claiming that various fixtures and improvements had been installed by Petra Calloway Faulkner during her occupancy. 6 of the 7 claimed structural improvements. The vanity, a ceiling fan in the primary bedroom, the pendant kitchen lights, a built-in shelving unit in the back room that Petra had described as her studio, a second ceiling fan in the guest room, and an exterior light fixture at the side entrance, appeared in the before-trip photographs. Not approximations of them. The specific fixtures, in the specific positions, with the specific finishes I had selected when I purchased them at various points between 2017 and 2023. The pendant kitchen lights were in photograph 22. The side entrance fixture was in photograph 36. The built-in shelving, which I had purchased as a flat-pack unit from a home improvement store in 2021 and assembled myself over a weekend, was visible in the backroom photograph at photograph 29. Still configured exactly as I had left it, and now serving as storage for Petra's fabric samples. I kept going! Many of the remaining items had a different problem. The receipts were not in Petra's name. They were purchases made through accounts registered to Tobias. His credit card, his online profile, his saved billing address. His name on the confirmation emails Petra's attorney had attached as supporting documentation. A spouse purchasing household goods from a shared account is not unusual. But the filing attributed those purchases to Petra as evidence of her individual investment in the property. When I flagged this for Renata the following morning, she said, "That's their third problem, after the photographs and the code question." The code question was the one that reduced the remainder most sharply. What survived the photograph comparison was, by my count, approximately $4,700 in new fixtures and cosmetic installations that appeared to post-date the before-trip photographs. The two items with the largest individual values in this surviving category were the custom window coverings for the master bedroom, heavy linen panels on a track system Petra had installed in September 2026, and a set of cabinet hardware she had replaced throughout the kitchen. The window coverings were on their own terms, well chosen. The fabric was good, and the installation was clean. I noted this in the planner without comment. The fact that something is well done is a separate question from whether you had the authority to do it. Renata's third problem, the code question, applied to every item in the surviving category. Georgia Residential Renovation Code requires a permit for structural modifications above a certain dollar threshold, with specific carve-outs for purely cosmetic work. The surviving items were cosmetic: new window coverings, cabinet hardware, two light fixtures that Petra could legitimately claim as her own purchases. None of them had been installed under a permit. None of them crossed the threshold that would require one. They were also, without exception, installed without my written consent. The legal significance of that last point is something Renata had explained to me on our first call. And the absence of written consent does not make a cosmetic improvement worthless to the person who made it. But it does remove the basis for an equitable interest claim built on that improvement. You cannot claim a share of a property because you hung better curtains without the owner's knowledge. The curtains are curtains. They are not equity. I wrote at the bottom of the exhibit page, in the margin below the last line item, $4,700 remaining. No permits. No consent in writing. Not structural. Then I photographed the annotated pages with my phone, sent them to Renata, and closed the exhibit. The number $47,200 had entered the filing as a claim. It left my desk as a notation. What happened to it in the intervening 3 hours was not dramatic. It was arithmetic. Receipt against photograph. Photograph against date. Date against ownership record. The same process I apply to any disputed property improvement in a commercial leasing dispute, with the same instruments: a dated visual record, a sequence of receipts, and a pen. I had the visual record because I had photographed every room of the house the morning I left for Denver. I had done that the same way I photograph every property I hand over access to, because 26 years of commercial leasing work had taught me that the person who has the before and after record controls the dispute. I had applied a professional habit to my own house at 5:45 on a November morning because it had not occurred to me not to. Renata called the following afternoon to confirm her one-paragraph response to Petra's filing had been submitted. She also told me she had filed an emergency access order requesting that the court grant me entry to the property within the next 10 days. The court granted it in 4. The access order was granted on a Wednesday. Renata texted me the court's confirmation at 11:06 a.m. 3 sentences: the date, the docket number, and the specific hours during which I was permitted to enter the property. I was allowed 1 hour between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. on Friday, with advance notice to Petra's attorney that I would be exercising the court's order. Petra and Tobias were not required to vacate during my visit, but the filing noted that they were not to interfere with my access to any room. They were not home when I arrived. I noticed this without deciding what to make of it. The new deadbolt was disengaged by the code the locksmith service had provided to Renata's office under the terms of the access order. I entered at 10:03 a.m. with my phone in my hand and my planner under my arm. I had not been inside my house in 26 days. The kitchen was first, because the kitchen is where you go when you come home. It is where I have gone every morning for 23 years. The coffee maker on the left of the counter. The window above the sink that faces east. The particular quality of the November light at that angle, which is thin and clear and falls on the counter in a long rectangle that moves across the tile as the morning goes on. The coffee maker was gone. A different one was in its place. A newer model. Silver. Positioned slightly closer to the microwave. This is the kind of detail that takes a moment to identify. Not the absence of the original thing, but the presence of a different thing in approximately the same position, which creates a brief confusion before you register the actual change. I noted it. I did not move it. The cabinet above the stove is where I keep the pans I use most often. A set of stainless steel skillets, and on the left side, the cast iron pan my mother bought in 1978 and used until she died, and which I have used since, and which requires specific care because the seasoning built up on cast iron over decades of use is not replaceable once lost. You do not put it in the dishwasher. You do not let it soak. You wipe it dry immediately and store it in a dry place with nothing metal resting directly against the cooking surface. I opened the cabinet. The cast iron pan was on the bottom of a stack. It had been placed face down on top of the stainless steel skillet, its handle toward the back, and the moisture from the skillet, which had apparently been put away while still damp at some point, had worked through the contact point and into the seasoning. There was a line of rust along the inside rim, approximately 2 inches long, brownish orange against the grey of the iron, at the point where the 2 pans had been sitting against each other. I took a photograph of the cabinet. I took a second one, closer, of the rust line. Then I moved to the next room. The hallway closet runs along the interior wall between the kitchen and the front room. It is narrow and deep, with a bifold door and a single overhead light on a pull chain. I have kept my winter coats in it since I moved in, on the left side. The charcoal wool coat I bought in 2019, the navy parka I use for travel, the camel-collared coat from a trip to New York in 2017 that I've kept, because it still fits, and because I like it. On the right side, in that closet, I have always kept a folding step stool, an umbrella, and a canvas bag with my emergency car kit. I opened the bifold door. My coats were at the back of the closet, pushed against the rear wall, with no space between them and the back panel. The front 2/3 of the rod were occupied by a system of hooks and bins that had not been there before. Black metal hooks on a freestanding rack, and on the shelf above, a series of labelled fabric boxes with contents visible through mesh panels. The boxes held fabric swatches, organised by colour. There were 7 of them. The canvas bag with my emergency kit was on the floor at the back, behind a plastic tub. I could not see the umbrella or the step stool. I photographed the closet. I did not move the hooks. The living room was the room I had been in the least over the 22 months. I worked primarily from my office on the road, and when I was home, I spent most of my time in the kitchen or the bedroom, and the living room had been a room I passed through rather than occupied. I say this because I want to be accurate about what I was walking into. Not a room I had strong daily feelings about, but a room that was still mine. The walls were the new colour Petra had chosen, a shade she had described to someone, at some point, as warm taupe, which reads in that light as a brownish grey that sits somewhere between the cream I had painted it in 2015 and the colour of the Hampton Inn corridor. It is not an ugly colour. It is also not a colour I would have chosen for that room, because the east-facing window creates a particular morning light in there that cream walls amplified and that this colour absorbs. The furniture was arranged toward the television. The television was mounted on the wall above the fireplace, a 65-inch flat screen in a slim black frame, mounted on a bracket I had not installed and had not authorized anyone to install, which meant there were 4 anchor points in my wall above the fireplace that I had not put there. The sofa was a sectional I did not recognize, positioned at an angle toward the screen. My furniture, the armchairs, the side tables, the floor lamp I brought from my previous house, was not in the room. I photographed the television mount. I photographed the anchor points in the wall above the fireplace. I photographed the sectional sofa and the view from where it sat. I did not move anything! I left at 10:51 a.m., 9 minutes before the access window closed. I had 53 photographs. I sent them to Renata from the driveway, sorted into 3 folders labelled kitchen, storage, and common areas. She replied in 11 minutes. Good! These are Exhibit B supplement. See you Wednesday. Wednesday was the hearing. I drove back to the Hampton Inn on Forsyth Street and checked back into room 412, which the front desk had held for me at my request. The room had been serviced since I left that morning. Fresh towels, bed made, the desk cleared. I set my planner on the desk and sat on the edge of the bed. Tobias called at 7:30 that evening. I had been expecting it. He asked how the walkthrough had gone. He asked it carefully, the way he has been asking everything carefully for the past 3 weeks, with pauses between the words as if he is weighing each one before he sets it down. Fine, I said. Mom! Tobias, I said, I need you to hear me on something. He waited. I'm not angry, I said. I want you to know that. I have been sitting with this for 26 days, and what I feel is not anger. Then what? He said. Finished, I said. I'm finished. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, with me? No, I said, with absorbing things that belong in a courtroom. We talked for 3 more minutes about nothing significant. Before he hung up, he said he would be at the hearing on Wednesday. I said all right. I set the phone on the nightstand and opened the planner to the page marked with Wednesday's date. And below the time and the courtroom number I had written 2 weeks ago when Renata filed the initial petition. I wrote 1 word, ready. Then I crossed it out and wrote instead what I meant, which was documents in order, photographs confirmed, camera archive confirmed, deed in bag. The hearing was in 7 days, and every piece of evidence I needed had been in my possession since before Petra changed the lock. The Fulton County Courthouse on a Wednesday morning in December smells the same as every courthouse I have been near in 26 years of property work. A combination of recycled air, paper, and the particular flat cleanliness of a building that processes 100 disputes a week and holds none of them personally. I arrived at 8:47 a.m. Renata was already in the corridor outside the courtroom with her briefcase open on a bench, reviewing the exhibit list one final time. "Deed," she said, without looking up. I took the manila envelope from the inside pocket of my laptop bag and handed it to her. She opened the envelope, checked the document, the notary seal, the recording stamp from the Fulton County Register of Deeds, the legal description, and returned it to the envelope. She clipped it to the front of a clear plastic sleeve labeled Exhibit A and set it on top of the stack in her briefcase. "All right," she said. "Let's go in." The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, which is always the case. Disputes that have taken up months of your life resolve themselves in rooms with fluorescent lighting and grey industrial carpet, and chairs that have been replaced in sections over the years so that no two rows quite match. The bench was at the front. The gallery had 6 rows. Tobias was in the second row. On the left side, in a grey sport coat I recognised from his wedding. He looked at me when I came in. I looked at him. Neither of us said anything. Petra and her attorney were at the respondents' table. Petra was wearing a dark blazer and had her hair pulled back. She sat with her hands in her lap and did not look toward the gallery. Renata and I took our seats. At 9:04 a.m., the judge entered. Renata presented first. She was at it for 18 minutes, which is not long in a courtroom, but felt precise in the way that well-prepared things feel. Not rushed, not padded, moving at the speed the evidence required. Exhibit A, the original 2003 deed, notarized and recorded, bearing the name Vivian Hargrove and no other. The judge reviewed it and set it on the bench to his left. Exhibit B, 37 photographs. Time-stamped 5:45 a.m. to 5:58 a.m. on November 13th, 2026, showing the interior of the property in its condition immediately prior to Vivian's departure for Denver. Renata walked the judge through 6 of them. The kitchen, the master bathroom with the vanity clearly visible, the back room before it became a studio, the living room before the furniture was replaced. The judge asked no questions about the photographs. He looked at each one for approximately 4 seconds and moved to the next. Exhibit C, 3 utility transfer forms, each filed during the week of November 13th to 18th, 2026, each bearing the name Petra Calloway Faulkner as account holder, each listing her occupant status as co-occupant with equitable interest. The judge read the phrase aloud once, quietly, and then set the forms beside the deed. "Counsel!" he said to Petra's attorney. "Proceed." Petra's attorney had been practicing for what I estimated was 12 to 15 years. The particular confidence of someone who knows how to build an argument, but had, in this case, been handed the wrong materials to build with. He argued equitable interest for 11 minutes. The argument was that Petra Calloway Faulkner had invested significant labour and personal funds in the improvement and management of the property over 22 months, that she had served as the property's primary resident during extended periods of the owner's absence, and that the totality of her contribution constituted the basis for a legally recognisable equitable interest that should be weighed against the petitioner's formal title claim. The judge let him finish. Then the judge said, "What document transfers any ownership interest to your client?" Petra's attorney paused. He looked at his notes. He said, "Your Honour, we are arguing that the equitable interest arises from the conduct of the parties, which in the absence of a formal document—" "I understand the theory," the judge said. I'm asking about the document. There was a silence in the courtroom of approximately 8 seconds. I know this because I counted them. It is a habit from years of negotiations where the first person to speak after a silence loses the upper hand. Petra's attorney said, "There is no recorded instrument, Your Honor." The judge made a note. Petra took the stand at 10:02 a.m. Her attorney asked her 3 questions, establishing her length of residence, the nature of her work in the property, and the basis for her belief that she held an interest in it. Her answer to the 3rd question was the one that mattered. "Vivian told me," she said, "that the house was mine to manage as I saw fit. She said that verbatim, 'This house is yours to manage as you see fit.' I understood that to mean I had her authorization to treat it as my primary residence and to make decisions about its upkeep and presentation." Renata stood. "Your Honor, the petitioner requests permission to enter exhibits." The judge said, "Proceed." Exhibit D was a 41-second clip from the Nest Hello camera archive. Time-stamped 8:14 a.m. on November 13th, 2026. Renata had arranged for the courtroom's display system to show it. The clip played without audio commentary. Just the footage. Clear and wide angle of Petra standing on the front step with a man in a grey work shirt, handing him a box containing a new deadbolt and speaking to him. The audio was audible in the room. Petra's voice saying to the locksmith, "The old one just stopped working. We need something more reliable." And then, 6 seconds later, the locksmith asking something Petra's head blocked, and Petra nodding and saying, "Yes, that's right. I'm the homeowner." Renata stopped the clip. The courtroom was quiet. Petra's attorney asked for a recess. The judge declined. Renata's cross-examination of Petra lasted 4 minutes. She asked 2 questions. The first, "You testified that Vivian Hargrove gave you verbal authorization to manage the property as your own. On the morning of November 13th, 2026, you told a locksmith that you were the homeowner of that property. Yeah, is that accurate?" Petra said, "I said it to simplify the interaction." Renata said, "The second question. Did Vivian Hargrove give you written authorization in any form to describe yourself as the owner of her property to any third party?" Petra looked at her hands. "No," she said. Renata returned to the table and sat down. The judge issued the order at 10:34 a.m. He read it from the bench in the same register he had used throughout the 90 minutes. Even precise, with no variation in tone between the procedural language and the substance of the ruling. No equitable interest had been established. The claim required a document transferring ownership. No such document existed. The utility transfer forms entered as Exhibit C, in which the respondent had identified herself as a co-occupant with equitable interest, had no legal basis, and were ordered reversed. All 3 utility accounts were to be restored to Vivian Hargrove's name within 10 business days. The counterclaim for $47,200 in property improvements was dismissed with prejudice. Tobias and Petra Faulkner were ordered to vacate the property at the address on record within 30 days of the date of this order. The judge collected his papers and left the bench. Petra and her attorney spoke in low voices for a moment. Then Petra stood and walked past our table toward the exit. She did not look at me. Her attorney gathered his files and followed her. Renata put the Exhibit A sleeve back into her briefcase and snapped it closed. She looked at me. 30 days, she said. I said, I know. Tobias was still in the second row of the gallery. He had not moved during the order. When I looked at him, he was looking at the carpet in front of the bench, the same way he had looked at the carpet in room 412 on that Saturday morning when I asked him if he had read the document. Renata said she would send me the finalized order by end of day. Then she said there was one more thing she wanted to review, the household management agreement Tobias had signed 3 months ago, the original of which Petra's attorney had produced during pre-trial, but which had not been entered into evidence because Renata had chosen not to request it. I want to look at the notary seal, she said. What remained? Day 31 was a Tuesday. Renata had confirmed the move-out by text the night before. They cleared the last load at 4:47 p.m. Property manager did the walkthrough. Keys are with the building super. I read it in room 412 and did not sleep well, which surprised me. I had expected to sleep well. I drove to the house at 8 in the morning with a paper cup of coffee I finished in the parking lot before I got out of the car. The front door opened with my key. The old one. The one that had not worked on a Tuesday morning 31 days ago. Renata had arranged for the locksmith the evening before. Same company, different technician. The new deadbolt was a standard Schlager. I had chosen it myself. I stood in the entry for a moment without moving. The house was mine again in the legal sense. It had been mine since the order was read at 10:34 a.m. in courtroom 7B. It was mine now in the physical sense. Empty. Quiet. The sound of it different without furniture absorbing the air. I had lived here for 23 years. I knew what it sounded like when it was mine. The living room walls were warm taupe. I had not chosen warm taupe. The anchor bolts from the television mount were still in the wall above the fireplace. Filled with spackle, but not painted over. I noted it and kept walking. The kitchen was clean. Whatever opinion I had formed of Petra in 31 days. She had left the kitchen clean. The counters wiped. The sink dry. The cabinets closed. I opened each one to confirm the contents were what I recognized. Most of them were. The cast iron pan was in the lower cabinet beside the stove, where it had always lived. I lifted it out and set it on the counter. The rust line was still there, along the inside rim where Petra had stored it face down on the wet stainless skillet. A thin orange crescent, maybe 4 inches. My mother had used this pan for 30 years before I inherited it. I had used it for 25 more. Oh, in 55 years of use. No one had stored it wet. I set it in the sink and ran warm water over it and went to find the supplies I needed. It took 40 minutes. Chainmail scrubber, kosher salt, warm water, a dry cloth, then oil. The same neutral oil I had always used, applied thin and rubbed into every surface. Then the pan into a 350-degree oven, upside down on the middle rack, for an hour. I set the timer on my phone and walked through the rest of the house while it ran. The hallway closet was empty. Her mesh boxes were gone from the rod. My winter coats were still pushed to the back. I moved them to the front. The back bedroom smelled like her studio. Solvent and linen. something floral underneath. The smell would fade. I knew that about paint and solvent. It fades in a week if you open the windows. I opened the window and left the door ajar. My bedroom was the least changed room in the house. The furniture was mine. The arrangement was the same. The bedding was different. She had not used my bedding, had stored it in the hall closet in a labelled bag, and I appreciated that more than I had expected to. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the room for a few minutes. The timer on my phone went off. I went back to the kitchen, turned off the oven, left the pan inside to cool with the door cracked. Renata called that afternoon. She had been reviewing the household management agreement since the hearing. Tobias's copy had surfaced, finally, in a box of documents Petra had packed in the move. The building super had set it aside when he found it in the unit.
"The notary stamp," Renata said. "I want you to sit down for this, although it won't surprise you."
I was already sitting. The seal on the signature page was not from a licensed notary. It was a decorative stamp, the kind sold on stationery websites for scrapbooking and craft projects. Gold foil, embossed lettering, no registration number, no state commission, no legal standing of any kind. A document notarized with a craft store seal is not notarized. A document not notarized is not enforceable in Georgia, in the way Petra's attorney had tried to argue it was.
She built her whole counterclaim on a document she invalidated herself, Renata said.
I did not say anything for a moment. Does Tobias know?
Not yet. I thought you might want to be the one to tell him. I thought about it. Send me the page.
She sent it. I looked at the seal. The slightly too ornate font, the generic scrollwork border, the absence of a commission expiration date in the space where a commission expiration date belongs. I had looked at enough legal documents in my career to know immediately what I was seeing. I thought about Tobias signing this without reading it. I thought about him sitting across from her while she pressed the craft store stamp into the gold foil and told him it was done.
I called him that evening.
He came the following Saturday. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table that had been there when he was growing up, the same 4 chairs, and I set the copy of the document in front of him and told him to read it from the beginning. He got 11 pages in before he stopped. He put the document down and looked at the table. He did not say anything for a long time. I did not fill the silence. I had made coffee. I poured him a second cup and sat across from him and let him have the time he needed. What he was working through was not something I could shorten for him. He had signed a document without reading it. The person who had handed him that document had pressed a decorative stamp into the signature line and told him it was a notary seal. Both of those things were true at the same time, and he was going to have to carry both of them. And there was nothing I could do about that except sit across from him at the table where he had done homework as a child and not look away. He called 2 weeks later and asked if I wanted to have dinner. I said yes. It was not easy. We did not resolve anything in one sitting. We ordered food and talked about things that were not the house and a few things that were, and he paid the check, and I let him. And we stood in the parking lot for a few minutes before we went to our separate cars. It was not fixed. It was a beginning. And I knew from 57 years of living that a beginning is not nothing. Now, if you have stayed with this story from the first Tuesday morning, if you were standing on that step with me, watching a door that should have opened not open, then you know that I am not a person who tells things as they happen. I told you this story because there is something in it that belongs to you, too. You do not have to be in a dispute. You do not have to own property. But if there is anyone in your life who has been slowly, quietly rearranging the terms of what you have and telling you it's reasonable, you may not know what document you need until you need it. Start now, before the door doesn't open, before the lock is different, before someone else's name is on your account, and you are trying to remember when you agreed to that. That is all I will say about it. You know what to do with it. I returned to the bedroom that night and set my planner on the nightstand. The deed was in the manila envelope. The same envelope I had carried out of this house 31 days ago, standing on the step with my suitcase at my feet. I folded the envelope's brass clasp down and slid it into the inside pocket of my laptop bag, which was hanging on the hook on the back of the bedroom door. I had carried it every day since that Tuesday. In the hotel room, in the courthouse, in Renata's office. I would carry it every day going forward. Not out of habit, out of clarity. There is a difference. Reflection. Vivian carried that deed for 23 years without thinking of it as protection. She filed it in a manila envelope after the 2003 closing, put it in a drawer, then a bag, then eventually the inside pocket of a laptop case hanging on the back of a bedroom door. And it accumulated no particular weight until a new deadbolt told her it had carried weight all along. A document does not become important the day you need it. It becomes important the day you sign it. You just do not always know that yet. Petra signed her name to utility transfer forms that called her a co-occupant with equitable interest. She told a locksmith she was the homeowner. She pressed a decorative stamp purchased from an online stationery shop into the signature line of a 3-page agreement and filed the result as a notarized instrument. She photographed rooms and drafted a listing at $589,000 in the first person. Each of those actions was a claim. None of them survived contact with a deed recorded in 2003 in Vivian's name. Alone, 22 years before any of it began. The claims were not neutralized by argument or confrontation. They were neutralized by a document that had been sitting in a manila envelope since before the marriage existed. Somewhere in your own life, there is a deed, a title, a will, an account record, a lease with your name on it, a document you have not looked at since the year you signed it. It is not dramatic. It is paper in a drawer or a file you have not opened in years. But if someone ever begins to speak about your home, your property, your account, as though the question of whose it is has already been settled in their favor, that document is the only voice that does not require you to raise yours.